All right, today's topic is for all of you men out there who are fathers. I want to talk to the dads today about the three pillars of what I call biblical fatherhood. And here's a picture I want you to get etched in your minds. If you want to be a dad who honors God, you should provide, you should protect, and you should empower. Let's break this down, and I want to start with provision. You should provide for your kids in at least these three ways. First of all, obviously, financially. I think a lot of dads feel the responsibility, the pressure, whatever you want to call it, to provide financially for their kids. And most dads actually do a pretty good job with that. By the way, this doesn't mean that you need to be the sole breadwinner in the family. Maybe in your situation, your wife does that. You still should have the primary responsibility to make sure that your kids are provided for financially. But here's the second area, and I think this is where a lot of dads fail. You should also provide for your kids emotionally. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to be emotional. This doesn't mean that you need to be soft. But men, I think it's important for you to understand that your kids, both your sons and your daughters, need some provision emotionally. They need to know that you're present. They need to know that you care about them. They need to know that you pay attention to how they're doing. So many of our kids these days are struggling with anxiety, with depression, and it's not just mom's job to talk to them about that. Dads, it's important for you also to provide for your kids emotionally. And the last area is also a spot where a lot of dads fall asleep on the job. You need to provide for your kids spiritually. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4 says it like this: Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. There's the emotional part. But look, Paul says, rather bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. In other words, dad, don't leave it to mom to be the spiritual leader in your home. Fathers, you need to provide for your kids spiritually. Now, in my life, the way that plays out, that doesn't mean that my wife is not involved. She's very, very involved. But I want to make sure that I'm leading them, that I'm modeling for them a pursuit of God. I model for them a prayer life. I model for them reading my Bible on a regular basis. I model for them discipling people. I get engaged with other men. I disciple other men, and my kids know it. And in this way, I'm bringing them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. Now, let's talk about that second pillar, protecting your kids. And first of all, you should protect your kids from dangerous adults. Obviously, when your kids are young, especially, you need to be on the lookout for adults that would mean them harm. And dads, you need to take the lead in protecting them. You should also protect them from dangerous friends. Now, this comes into play as your kids get a little bit older, into those older elementary years and then junior high and high school years. Hey, Dad, do you pay attention to your kids' friend group? Do you know who they're hanging out with? You know, the friends that your kids hang out with will influence them as they get older. Those kids will influence your son and daughter probably more than you do. So be intentional about who your kids hang out with. Protect them from dangerous friends. Make sure to not just leave that up to your wife to pay attention to. And then thirdly, protect your kids from dangerous ideas. We're talking here about the secular worldview, the messages that your kids are receiving every single day from TV, from music, from movies, from influencers. This is an extension of that area where we should be leading our kids, providing spiritually for them. We need to make sure that we're helping them to understand how to view the world biblically. Again, this is a big part of a dad's job. It's not just a mom's job. So clearly a part of that is making sure that they're in the Word, like I said earlier, making sure that they have a prayer life, making sure that they're connected, that they're going to church. But get in the habit of having conversations regularly with your kids. Hey, what are some of the ideas that you're learning at school? Some teachers, what are they saying? What are your friends saying? Engage with your kids so that you can protect them from dangerous ideas as you help them to understand what it means to buy into a biblical worldview. So those were the first two pillars. You want to provide for your kids. You want to protect your kids. And then finally, this last one, empowering your kids. This has to do with what we call the fundamental law of parenting. And here it is, if you haven't seen it in a while. Healthy parents transfer ownership of their kids' lives from parent to child through the ongoing process of maturity. This is what you should always have in mind, dads, as you empower your kids to take ownership of their own lives. Here's a great graph to help you to understand this. When your kid is first born, the parent takes almost all of the ownership. The kid can sleep, and the kid can eat, and the kid can poop, and that's about it. But as your child gets older, parents, you need to make sure that you're letting your kid take more and more ownership of their choices, of their perspective, of the way they're going to live their lives, so that eventually, by the time your kid is 18, hopefully your child can primarily take ownership of their life, and parent, then you can just come in and be supportive. Now, this is where I think a lot of Christian parents can get it wrong, because in your desire to provide for and protect your kids, you can sort of be a helicopter parent and never let them go out and make mistakes, never let them make decisions for themselves, so that you raise them in this sheltered environment over the course of 18 years. And at some point, they're going to leave your home. At some point, they're going to be impacted by the rest of the world. And if you don't help them to take ownership for some of those things over the course of their lives, and I think you're setting them up for a rude awakening once they hit those 18, 19, 20-year-old years. So empower them more and more through the course of their childhood so that they can take ownership of their lives in a healthy way, and they can own their faith for themselves. It's not just the faith of mom and dad, but it's their own faith, because you've provided for them, you've protected them, and you've empowered them to pursue God on their own. Back to Ephesians chapter 6, Paul says this: "Children, obey your parents because you belong to the Lord, for this is the right thing to do. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. If you honor your father and mother, things will go well for you, and you will have a long life on the earth." I see in this passage the fundamental law of parenting. Paul is actually quoting the Old Testament. This is one of the 10 commandments, but it's a commandment that is spoken to kid and to parent, basically saying, look, mom and dad, you have a responsibility up to a point. The kids have a responsibility to obey and honor their parents, so that eventually the kid becomes the parent and the process starts all over again. God has always been about empowering us to make our own choices, and when we make the right ones, then it'll go well for us. Now, use those questions down below to talk about this with your mentor or your men's group.